Welcome to Assistive Technology and Universal Design for Learning, Practical Strategies for Classroom Teachers. This is brought to you by the Diagnostic Center in Northern California. There are 3 diagnostic centers. There is one in Northern California, located in Fremont. Our Central California office is located in Fresno, and our office in Southern California is located in Los Angeles. Today's presentation is brought to you by Linda Sanguinetti, Education Specialist, and Betsy Caporale, Speech-Language Pathologist, AACAT Specialist. The Diagnostic Center Northern California offers assessment to students ages 3 to 22 at no cost to the district or family. We also offer trainings, which you can see by visiting our website. We do have an Ask a Specialist website where several of our specialists answer questions posed by the public, and we also offer lots of special projects to classrooms and SLPs. Here are today's learning outcomes. First, we'd like you to become familiar with the principles of universal design for learning and implications for accessing the Common Core State Standards. You'll also be able to distinguish between accommodations and modifications, determine the differences between scaffolding and rescuing, and you will also learn how to determine appropriate assistive technology solutions for students with special needs. Lastly, you'll learn how to use a feature match matrix to develop an assistive technology toolkit.
Today's agenda. We'll start by defining the terms Universal Design for Learning, UDL, Assistive Technology, AT. We'll look at rescuing versus scaffolding. We'll look at ways to use assistive technology to provide universal design for learning, which will promote the independence and the self-advocacy in the learning process. We will also practice developing an AT UDL implementation matrix, which is available on the website. There are a couple of resources that you'll need for today's training. Both can be found on our Diagnostic Center website. One is the AT UDL implementation matrix, and also the activity matrix. Again, you can find both on our Diagnostic Center webpage. So let's start by talking about the principles of universal design for learning. That is when we're looking at the way in which we teach, in which we present a lesson, and we're providing multiple opportunities for student engagement. We're providing multiple opportunities for presentation of the lesson, and multiple opportunities for action and expression on the part of the student. UDL is used to support diverse learners. That is its purpose. It offers choices of learning context. It offers choices of content and the tools used, and it offers adjustable levels of challenge. Think about it as kind of a set of training wheels. It gives the student, it gives the writer just enough support, but you have to have a plan in which to remove that support so that the student or the bicycle rider can be independent. Components of a UDL curriculum. The overall thought is that we're anticipating the student's needs, we're anticipating the learner needs, and we're not waiting for them to fail. We're focusing on modifications and adaptations from the very start. We're including all students. Goals of the lesson and goals of the activities are described as learning expectations, but we're acknowledging the variety of our students and the strengths and weaknesses that they possess, and in turn the flexibility of tools and materials and methods that we then need to provide to make the learning successful. You're basically looking at the curriculum and the barriers that it presents for some of our students and acting before and changing those elements before the student has a chance to fail. So this is a great slide to look at when you're trying to determine whether something is universal design for learning or is it assistive technology. So the overall goal for both of these is the same. We want our students to access the curriculum successfully. If what's being provided is for lots of students, probably universal design for learning. But if we're focusing on our specific students, our specific student needs, that particular student's strengths and weaknesses, then probably it's assistive technology.
We're going to take some time to talk about accommodations versus modifications. Accommodations are really just tools or strategies that help provide equal access to instruction or to the assessment process. The purpose of accommodation is to eliminate barriers brought on by the disability, but it does not change the content or reduce learning or achievement expectations. Whereas a modification is an intervention or a tool which actually does change the core content and or performance standards. Here are some examples of accommodations and modifications. I'm not going to read all of them, but as you can see, accommodations are really just ways to accommodate a student's learning differences, whereas modifications are really about changing the content and changing the way in which the curriculum is accessed for the student. So what is assistive technology? Assistive technology is any device used to assist someone with daily functions. So it's not something that's used just by people with special needs or disabilities. We use assistive technology every day. Examples include President Obama using a selfie stick, and it could be any one of us opening up a bottle of wine for dinner. IDEA has a very clear definition about assistive technology and assistive technology services. Assistive technology can be any device, whether it's acquired commercially, it's just off the shelf, customized, but any device used to improve functional capabilities of children with disabilities. Whereas an AT service is any service that directly assists that child with the acquisition or use of an assistive technology device. So that would include the assessment process. So who should be considered for assistive technology? Assistive technology must be considered for all students who have an IEP. So does that mean that we have to provide high-tech devices or computerized systems or consult with an AT specialist for every student who has an IEP? Absolutely not. Many times these decisions can be made within the IEP team process without outside expertise. It's only when you're considering assistive technology that's very high tech or that someone on your IEP team is not familiar with that you really should consult with an outside expert. So we're going to talk a little bit now about areas in which assistive technology can be applied. These include mobility, communication, hearing, seeing, computer access, academics, and leisure activities. When we talk about assistive technology for communication, we're really referring to that part of AT which we call AAC or Augmentative Alternative Communication. An AAC device or system can be something as simple as an eye gaze board, which means a board that displays either objects, pictures, or photos, and the student makes their selection just by gazing or moving their eyes toward that symbol. Other types of assistive technology for communication include something as simple as a whiteboard, pencil and paper, symbol-based communication boards, computers, speech-generating devices, and voice output devices. And we'll get into those in a little bit more detail later. In terms of mobility, here are some assistive technology tools that are used by people who have difficulty with mobility, whether it be walking or using their arms. Walkers, wheelchairs, grab bars, powered mobility toys, scooters or carts, adapted vehicles for driving are all examples of assistive technology designed for mobility. In terms of computer access, when we talk about assistive technology, we really look at two different areas. The input device, which includes the keyboards or a switch or a touch screen or mouse, and then the output device, which includes the monitor, the printer, or speakers. Here are examples of some input devices. As you can see, that includes adapted keyboards, switches, and when we look at switches, a switch is really just an on-off mechanism that's controlled externally. And on the right, you can see all different kinds of switches used by students with mobility issues. Here are some more input devices that include alternative mouse, trackball mouse, flatball, and probably the newest and most exciting input technology out there right now is eye gaze technology, whereby the computer is controlled completely by the user's eyes. So what they're really doing is using their eyes to select an icon or a page on the computer.
So now let's focus on the area of reading and technologies that support our learners. We'll look at low-tech, we'll look at high-tech, and we'll also look at no-tech. So in the area of low-tech on the left-hand side here, we can use highlighters to highlight text within a reading passage. That would be a way to support a learner. High, low contrast colors of pages versus the text. Use of a magnifier, enlarged print. Oftentimes, teachers will use sticky notes to flag important details within the text so a student can come back to it very easily. Using a marker to track one line at a time, or even a marker with a hole in the center to track one word at a time. And then graphic organizers are always very nice to use after reading to help organize information. High-tech examples include books on tape, talking electronic devices, e-text, e-book readers, such as a Kindle or a Nook or an iPad, screen text, reading software, and then instructional software, remedial and adaptive, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So now let's talk about no-tech examples, or what I like to think of as just good teaching practices. Pre-teaching of vocabulary, very important for our students to know what they're going to be reading about before they get to the unknown words. So strongly recommend that. Think about ways in which you can offer your students multiple opportunities and multiple ways in which to read the same text. They can read it silently, they can read it with a partner, they can read it within a whole group. Think about ways you can incorporate that. Story mapping, read aloud activities are great. Read, stop, respond is a great strategy to put in place to ensure that students don't miss important features within the stories or the text that they're reading. To promote that active participation, a sentence starter using academic language that we want our students to use is often very helpful. Think, pair, share. Another great strategy. Keeping directions simplified helps out. And if we can provide a table or a chart to help organize the facts and the features of what students are reading, creating a visual is very helpful for a lot of our students. And having the opportunity to act out or role play different parts of the story also is very supportive. We're going to shift a little bit now. We're going to talk about technologies that support writing, again with the same structure, low-tech, high-tech, and then no-tech. So on the left-hand side here, we're looking at some low-tech examples using stamps. Maybe we're using some pencil grips of different size, or maybe different types of pens or pencils. Exploring the use of a slant board or a softer lead when pencil pressure is a little bit hard. Laminated copies of alphabet to help with letter formation. Maybe we're going to use a clipboard to keep that paper from slipping around, or stencils, magnetic letters, or specially lined papers. Those all can support our students. High tech, we're looking at portable note takers, digital recorders, talking word processors. Going down the list, we're looking at those alternate keyboards that Betsy talked about earlier, PowerPoint software, screen magnifiers, and of course the iPad and the Chromebooks. Good teaching practices are those no-tech examples, again, using a highlighter to frame sections of text. Perhaps instead of writing on every line, we could support our students in writing on every other line. Helps with organization and making things very clear. Allowing students to use single or just really short answers. We don't always have to write a whole lot to get the answers down, and that allows a student to share their knowledge. Of course, giving extra time, magnifying worksheets if needed, allowing choice when we have to produce something for an assignment. Can it be video? Can it be oral? Maybe using drawing or painting or song. What other ways can a student demonstrate their knowledge besides just writing? And then also providing a checklist to make sure all those elements are included. If we shift to the area of mathematics, let's look at the low-tech technologies that are supporting our students in that area. It could be an abacus. I still see them out in the classrooms. Enlarged rulers, number lines, of course. Large print check registers, a calculator, or even a talking calculator. Those math facts charts are great to have out there. For some of our higher level math, we've got just having a formula chart and just to help support that memory of those steps. Graph paper to help line up our math problems, and of course the use of manipulatives. When we look at high-tech examples, we've got on-screen calculators. There's nothing wrong with that, and any kind of adapted software or apps that are out there. No-tech examples or good teaching practices in the area of math. Consider reducing the workload. Maybe a student can do every other problem. They can do the odds. They can do the evens. Ask yourself, do they really have to do every single one to demonstrate their knowledge? Maybe minimize the number of problems on a page. Visually, that helps out a little bit. Providing extra time. Having a peer or adult read the problem and record the answer. Also nice to chart student progress. Little bit of competition is not always a bad thing. Using games is a great way to demonstrate knowledge, and of course to provide a checklist.
We're going to talk now about technologies that enable play, such as adaptive toys, games, and electronics. And these are especially important for the very young kiddos we work with, where we're trying to get them to interact with something as independently as possible. We're teaching them cause effect so that by hitting a switch, they're able to make something happen. And these kinds of technologies also enable interaction between a child and their peers, or a parent, or any other person they come in contact with. So really what we're talking about is using switches to help children develop some of those early play skills. Some of the technologies that enable play, a lot of low-tech examples given there: card holders, large print, magnifiers, Velcro would be considered a low-tech assistive technology tool. large format remote controls, reading adaptations, whether it be books on tape or a simple book holder. And then, of course, the high-tech examples include the internet sites, adaptive computer software, digital music players, smartphones, as well as tablet computers or iPads. Technologies that assist with hearing deficits. There are quite a few of these, including an FM system. FM systems can either be worn individually or they can be set up as a sound-filled system for an entire classroom. Oftentimes these FM systems can be used with a hearing aid. Some of the other technologies to assist students with hearing deficits include strobe lights, text telephones, caption phones, and one of the newer technologies is the video remote interpreting, where a person with a hearing impairment actually has their phone conversation interpreted by a live interpreter on a TV screen. Assistive technologies are also available for adapting environments, and those include simple things you see in public restrooms, public facilities, ramps, wider doorways, high-rise toilets, and then some of the high-tech examples include infrared motion detectors, computerized control of lights, TVs, alarms, and appliances, and we've certainly come a long way with this type of technology. In fact, I'm sure many of you control your heating and air conditioning and maybe your alarm systems at home from your smartphone. Some of the current trends in the field of assistive technology include iPads or tablets, Chromebooks, smartboards, curriculum-based adaptive software, voice activation technology, which is actually available in most vehicles these days. Of course, e-text, we've talked a little bit about eye gaze technology. Also adapted computer stations in the classroom, and technology that's integrated right into the classroom, such as Apple TV. And as part of the Common Core curriculum, of course, we are now starting with computer-based assessment as well. We wanted to take some time to talk about adapted versus remedial software or applications. Adapted software is really designed to meet the unique needs of a specific student. Materials are highly personalized, and it allows students to access the curriculum in an alternative manner. So the curriculum for students who use adapted software will look very different than the curriculum for the other students in the classroom. Remedial software, on the other hand, is designed to help the student catch up to the expected competency levels. So it's not necessarily designed specifically for students with special needs, but it can be used with students, say, with mild learning disabilities or delays, to help them catch up, utilizing a traditional systematic approach to learning. So how are AT needs determined? Well, the first place to start is always within the IEP team process, because typically IEP team members can make recommendations and determine appropriate strategies without any outside expertise. When you're considering assistive technology that goes beyond the expertise of the IEP team, that's when you really want to look at specialists who work with these students using the more highly tech or more specific types of strategies and implementation tools. It's important to remember that this is always a collaborative, ongoing process It's not about an AT specialist coming out and telling the team what to do. It's really about the specialist working with the team during the assessment and implementation process, and it is an ongoing process. And of course, the AT needs will be changing as the students' environments and skills are changing. So who implements assistive technology? Pretty much anyone who interacts with that student. And we have a list of implementators here, but of course you could probably think of many more. But that might include the bus driver, maybe the lunch lady, classmates, peers, anyone who interacts with that student at school. And it's also important to remember assistive technology is never ever about a product. Assistive technology is a process. So when you're considering assistive technology, there are lots of factors that go into it, including the environment, the student's skills, and the type of technology available. And those things will always be changing. The environment is constantly changing, skills are changing, and technology is being improved all the time. Best practices for implementing assistive technology. First of all, always consider a variety of assistive technology strategies across the range of low-tech, mid-tech, and high-tech. It's never about one tool or one strategy. You want to make sure the student has an efficient way to access the curriculum at all times. It's also important to develop a specific and detailed action or implementation plan, and we're going to practice doing that a little bit later in this presentation. In terms of assessment, you will be constantly assessing the student's needs, and you will want to make changes as the skills and environments change. Remember, we mentioned earlier that assistive technology is an ongoing process. Whenever possible, involve the user in the decision making. The students really like to be involved in the types of tools they're going to be using rather than telling them the tools they're going to use. So make sure you involve them in that process. As we mentioned before, you always want to consult with experts outside the IEP team when you feel that you've exhausted all of your expertise within the team. Training is a huge part of implementation of assistive technology, and that training needs to be provided to everyone who works with the student. And then in terms of transitions, as a student transitions to a new school setting or maybe transitions out of the school setting, you need to plan well in advance for that for students with assistive technology to make sure that those assistive technology strategies are in place when they exit the program or enter a new program. So how can the same tool or strategy be considered assistive technology for one student and universal design for others? And we're going to spend the next few minutes talking about that.
So what does a classroom using technology integration look like? It's one that's using the internet for students to do research. The students are using Google Docs to turn in their homework and to work together in groups. Students are checking their grades online at school and at home. PowerPoint presentations are a great way to show and demonstrate a student learning. The use of smart boards are used to present lessons. Sound field systems are in place within the classroom to enhance the teacher's voice for all students. And YouTube videos are a great learning tool that can be used within the classroom. So if you're viewing this with another person or a small group, now would be a good time to kind of stop, either talk with yourself or talk to your neighbor, and think about and discuss the technology that's being used within your class to enhance the learning process. Ask yourself, is technology being used to differentiate instruction? Is technology being used in a meaningful and purposeful way? Do you employ a variety of assistive technology tools and strategies? And are students offered choices of technology options? All of those things are very important. But when using computers and when using iPads, it's more than just that technology, because there isn't always an app for that. Everyone wants to say, oh, there's an app for this, there's an app for that. But when you look at some of the apps that are being used on an iPad, they look like glorified worksheets. It's just selecting an answer and putting it in a box. Or they're not age appropriate for students, or they're really not meaningful or relevant. Technology at our fingertips today, there's tools that are readily accessible in every classroom. So ask yourself, what technologies are you already using? And are there technologies in my classroom that are not being used or being underutilized? On this slide, we'd like to share with you 3 resources that will be supportive as you select apps for students with learning challenges. We have the Parents Helping Parents website that has a great iTech center looking at a variety of apps. We have Spectronics, and we have iResources for special education, 3 great resources to check out. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about scaffolding versus rescuing. And that is scaffolding and rescuing that us as educators might be doing. So when we look on the left-hand side of the screen, we're going to talk about scaffolding, and I'm referring to a variety of instructional techniques that are used to kind of move your students forward so that they have a stronger understanding, and in the process, they're building independence, their independence within the learning process. And so lessons are planned, they're very intentional, we're very deliberate and calculated, it's very student-focused, with steps to kind of remove those supports, empowering, and the expectation is on active learning and active participation. Versus on the right-hand side of the screen when we're talking about rescuing, that's referring to a teacher assisting the struggling learner too early and too deeply, and not allowing the student to experience critical thinking, not giving them the opportunity to make some mistakes where they themselves could learn from that. It is part of the learning process. So in essence, those lessons or teachings are accidental, it's very instructor focused. There's no real plan to remove those supports. The teacher's doing a lot of the work, and as a result, it's absolutely exhausting. And what you're ending up doing is generating passive learning versus, active learning, which is what we want.
Now that we've covered the basics of assistive technology and universal design for learning, we're going to show you how to put all of this together using an AT-UDL implementation plan. And as was mentioned earlier, you can get this matrix from our website, and that website was on the first or second slide of this presentation. So what is the AT-UDL implementation plan used for? Well, it's really designed to determine the who, what, when, where, and how of the technology being used. Who will be responsible, what tools and strategies will be used, when will these strategies be used or implemented, where will this take place, and how is the technology going to be used to assist the student. Here's a sample of what the AT-UDL implementation plan looks like. This is a blank template, and again, this is available on the DCN website. And I'm going to take some time now to talk about student A, and we're going to show you how to design an implementation plan for him and give you an idea of what that might look like. So this student is diagnosed with a significant speech-language impairment. Both receptive and expressive language are impacted, as well as articulation. His intelligibility is judged to be about 25 to 30%, sometimes less. He is fully included in a second grade class, and he currently receives designated support services, including speech language, RSP, resource support, and he also receives support from the reading specialist. Currently, his program doesn't allow for him to have much interaction at all with his peers, and his social skills are significantly impacted by his communication deficits because his peers just don't understand him. So he's kind of isolated himself, and he's very self-conscious about speaking. And because he's pulled out for much of his school day, that further prohibits him from having a lot of contact with his peers. So this is what Student A's implementation plan looks like. Across the top we have activity, adoption, location, facilitator, as needed, and when this is going to occur. So let's start with math, which takes place in the morning. This student is going to be working on the computer or maybe an iPad with an adapted educational app or software at his instructional level so he can work as independently as possible. Facilitation will be provided by staff or a peer. We really like to include peer tutors or helpers as often as possible. And in terms of location, you can see this is happening in the classroom rather than on a pull-out basis. If we go down to the next activity, which is reading, the student is going to be using graphic novels. And for those of you who aren't familiar with graphic novels, they're novels that just provide lots and lots of visuals, pictures, kind of like a cartoon type of a book, but really providing that visual support the student needs. And also in graphic novels, the text is usually a little bit simpler, less complex than would be available in the standard novel. This student also is going to have books on tape available. Choral reading is something we might want to use with him, and pre-teaching of vocabulary. And I wanted to mention also, under math, we have Smartboard. So this might be a way for this student and other students to interact with the rest of the class and provide that visual support. The Smartboard implemented this way would really be a form of UDL, Universal Design for Learning, because it's really benefiting the whole class. Whereas the interactive computer or things that the student is doing independently would be more of an assistive technology support. So I'm not going to go over the entire day, but I did want to point out recess and lunch. If you notice, we're going to have structured games available for this student. He might be involved in a team sport, lunch bunch, special friends. Those are things that might be set up by the psychologist or the speech therapist or both. This is going to be taking place on the cafeteria, playground, or maybe in the classroom. And the facilitators, as you can see, would be the SLP, psychologist, of course peers, maybe the IEP case manager, and perhaps even the yard duty. So at recess and lunch, this student is going to have support helping him not only with communication, but also helping with him participate as independently as possible in meaningful activities with his peers. So that's what the implementation plan would look like for student A. So we know that selecting the right tools and activities takes very careful planning, and also remember that these tools and activities will change as the students' skills and environments change. So the implementation plan is really a working document that it will always be tweaked a little as the students' needs change. So now that we've planned meaningful high-interest activities, we've got all of the tools and strategies ready in place for the student, how are we going to infuse academics, independence, motor goals, speech and language goals? How are we going to infuse these across the school day, across all environments for the student? So we have the implementation plan, and we're going to introduce you to another tool that we use at the Diagnostic Center, and that is the activity matrix. This is what it looks like. So what is an activity matrix? Well, it's really designed to be used to address all the IEP goals for the student across all activities of their day, to identify goal and skill areas to be addressed during a specific activity, and it's also a really nice data collection tool. And we're going to show you how this can be implemented in just a moment. Why use an activity matrix? Clearly a very collaborative tool, so really supports that collaborative team approach. It aids in communication, so it provides a visual support for the teacher, the educational instructional assistants, and all of the support personnel that serve that student. And it depicts exactly how consultation services are provided. Clearly increases students' independence, and it's a great way for data collection and helps monitor the acquisition of those IEP goals. Supports inclusive education, and supports the evidence-based practice for students with special needs of naturalistic teaching. And because educational assistants or paraprofessionals and the IEP support team really need to have a clear understanding of what kinds of supports that student needs across his school day in the classroom to access the curriculum and become as independent as possible. And we also want a tool that supports participation in the least restrictive environment, and this tool certainly does that. So as we mentioned, the activity matrix requires that everyone collaborates, everyone on the IEP team has a role in contributing to the matrix. We recommend collaborating using email because we know it's hard for IEP teams to get together on a regular basis. We all have busy schedules, so electronic versions can make the revising, editing, and including all that information much easier. And when the matrix needs to be updated, the document can be sent to the entire team as an attachment. Remember to rename the files with the current date, just so you know you're looking at the most recent. This is an activity matrix that we put together for him. This is a sample, and this would just be a way of including him in the classroom more with his DIS support services offered on a collaborative consultative basis within the classroom. So across the top, you can see the different goal areas: academics, receptive language, articulation, expressive language, independence, and social. And all of these different support providers are going to consult and collaborate within the classroom with the classroom teacher, and this is what it would look like. So for instance, silent reading, we're going to have him read a high interest graphic novel. That graphic novel is going to provide the VS or visual support that student needs. For receptive language during silent reading, we're going to have him highlight unfamiliar words and then review those words with the teacher or staff so that he can help increase his receptive language and vocabulary skills. In terms of articulation, we're going to offer him an alternative response mode in the classroom. So he can answer questions about the text, maybe using yes, no, or short answer, or closed procedure. In terms of independence, we're going to give him a visual schedule so that he can get through the school day as independently as possible without having to ask an adult, what happens next, what do I do next? He's going to have that schedule right there with him to refer to at all times. And then in terms of social, he's going to really need some systematic intervention to increase his interaction with peers. During silent reading, that may be sharing about a book with a peer. The next daily activity is math. He's going to be using a computer with adapted software. Remember, we talked about the difference between adapted and remedial software. He's going to be using a math activity on the computer while the other students are working maybe in a workbook or with worksheets. He's going to complete a math activity on the computer with adapted software, probably more of an interactive type activity at his instructional level. Then he might want to review some of that math vocabulary with teacher and staff before the lesson. In terms of articulation, expressive language, he could share about the math activity using some of that newly learned vocabulary. And then because he's completing activities at his instructional level on the computer, it's going to increase his independence in accessing the curriculum. And then in the area of social, he could review that math activity with a peer, or he could even participate with a peer in that math activity. So all the way down the left-hand side, again, are his activities of his day. And then across the matrix are all the different areas he'll be working on and all the goal areas he'll be working on at the same time. And the DIS support provider who can help with those interventions across the school day. So I'm not going to go over this whole thing. You can read it yourself, but I'm hoping that gives you an idea of what the activity matrix looks like and how it really helps support collaboration among team members, and at the same time really increases the support the student receives in the classroom with his peers. So he's really becoming a part of the classroom rather than pulled out for most of his day. Now we're going to give you an opportunity to try out these tools. We'd like you to start by developing an AT-UDL implementation plan for your student, and you can do this right now as a group or individually, but when you get back to your school sites, we are hoping you will use both these tools with the entire IEP team. So after you've developed your AT-UDL implementation plan, so you've got all those nice tools and strategies figured out, and you're determining who's going to help with that, you're going to create your activity matrix, and that's really designed to help with the whole collaborative approach to providing a curriculum and addressing goals across the curriculum. And remember, when you are developing this implementation plan and the activity matrix, always consider a variety of tools and strategies. Do not focus just on the iPad or just on worksheets. Make sure that student has a variety of tools and strategies available, and also that those tools and strategies are meaningful at the student's instructional level, and design activities that the student can follow through with as independently as possible, or perhaps with a peer. And then also remember, focus on scaffolding rather than rescuing. The idea is to give the student the tools and strategies they need to be an independent learner, not to rescue them. And it's never about catching up. It's about helping them become an independent learner and helping them learn as much as they possibly can in a functional, meaningful environment. So to review and wrap up, today you've learned about AT and UDL, Assistive Technology and Universal Design for Learning, how they're the same and how they're different. You've also learned about scaffolding versus rescuing, and of course our goal as educators is always to provide that scaffolding. And then we've talked a lot about the collaborative approach to providing AT and UDL using the tools that we've provided, the implementation plan and the activity matrix. And again, both of these tools are available on our website. We hope that these are tools that you can use as a collaborative tool with your entire IEP team. We have found that this is a really nice way to assist students with complex needs and at the same time include them in the classroom as much as possible. If you have any questions, we would love to hear from you. Linda Sanguinetti, Education Specialist, and Betsy Caporale, Speech Pathologist, AACAT Specialist. And the best way to reach us is via email, and we've included our email addresses here. Good luck, and we hope to hear from you.